Sisters and brothers, I think Catherine and I have been traveling through the same scenery, both in pictures and in contents. I'm sorry. This picture is taken from Jordania, near the ancient town of Petra, quite near those pictures Catherine has shown us. But when Lena asked me to give this presentation on this subject, I had to try to find some literature about it. First, I went into my own library and found a book I hadn't read since the 90s. Henry Nouwen's book, The Wounded Healer, was a treasure in those days, but now it still helped me, and I hope it will help us too. How to be a spiritual director, or how to be a wounded healer. As we have discussed, living under hard times is usually the situation when spiritual direction is needed. Many will become aware of spiritual support to be able to cope on. This is familiar to us. But also we spiritual directors meet hard times in our lives. How do we meet those periods? And how does it affect our direction? I have two perspectives to these questions. The first one is this Henry Nouwen's book, The Wounded Healer, and the other is my own experience. In his book, Nouwen is thinking mainly about Catholic priests, but I think his perspectives are important for all of us. This book or booklet is old because it's published in 1970. Some themes in it, especially concerning society, are past and old-fashioned. But the principal question in the book is still topical: how to be a spiritual director in this world. The book deals with the wounded state of people, and Nouwen brings up the central word loneliness that to him expresses best that wounded state. Loneliness is as severe a problem nowadays as it was 50 years ago. Individuation, COVID, and increased time online have caused feelings of loneliness, especially among young people. Although Nouwen speaks of the feeling of loneliness, I think we could also add some other basic human feelings and experiences we all share: fears, anxiety, and sorrow, as well as loneliness. Nouwen says priests or spiritual directors share these same basic feelings in their own lives, as we have just discussed about. That is the reason they are wounded healers, and they can understand the brokenness and wounds of others. But the painful awareness of loneliness, fear, and sorrow is an invitation to transcend our limitations and look beyond the boundaries of our existence. Nouwen understands that it's difficult to admit our own pain. When you are forming a community, it's hard to feel loneliness. When you encourage people, it's difficult to feel fear inside you. And when you console people, it is hard to feel sorrow. But escaping or denying our own pain does not help meeting the pain our directees are feeling. Covering up our own life experience is also not possible when helping others. Nor a spiritual exhibitionism is any answer. We are not helping somebody in his or her suffering by sharing our own problems. Nuven says, constant willingness to see one's own pain and suffering as rising from the depth of the human condition, which all men share, makes one's own wounds a source of healing. Nuven emphasizes that doing like that, he would not romanticize the pain and that he wouldn't replace the idea of self-fulfillment with self-castigation. He thinks the idea of the wounded healer deepens and broadens self-realization and self-fulfillment. Understanding our own pain makes it possible to transform our own weakness into strength. How does this healing happen? Nuven's central concept is hospitability. It helps us break through the narrowness of our own fears and to open our houses to strangers. The intuition is that salvation comes to us in the form of a tired traveler. The healing power of hospitability grows from coming to terms with one's own loneliness, fear, and sorrow, and from the feeling at home in his or her own house. As a host or hostess, he or she can offer hospitality to his or her guests. Hospitality demands concentration in listening to the guest, and it demands feeling at home in one's life and in the heart. Concentration leads to meditation and contemplation. They are necessary conditions of hospitality. Nuven says, by withdrawing into ourselves, not out of self-pity, but out of humility, we create the space for another to be himself or herself and to come to us on his or her own terms. Human withdrawal is a very painful and lonely process because it forces us to face directly our own condition in all its beauty as well as misery. When we are not afraid to enter our own center and to concentrate on the stirrings of our own soul, we come to know that being alive means being loved. This experience tells that we can love because we are born from love, and we can give because our own life is a gift, and we can set others free because we are set free by him whose heart is bigger than ours. A spiritual director who has come to terms with his or her own loneliness, fear, and sorrow, and is at home in his or her own house, is a host or hostess who can offer hospitality to his or her guests. He or she gives them a friendly space where they may feel free to come and go, to be close or distant, to rest and to play, to talk or to be silent, to eat and to fast. Hospitality may offer an empty space to find his or her own soul. How does this kind of direction or companionship heal? It is healing because it takes away the illusion that wholeness can be given by one to another. It is healing because it does not take away the loneliness, fear, or sorrow and the pain of another but invites him or her to recognize his or her loneliness, fear, sorrow on a level where it can be shared. Nuven reminds us that the recognition of the broken and mortal state of us all leads to liberation. A shared pain does not paralyze any longer, but mobilize when understood as a way to liberation. No director or companion can save anyone. He or she can only offer himself or herself as a guide to fearful people. Hospitability becomes community as it creates a unity based on a shared confession of our basic brokenness and on a shared hope. That was from Henry Nuven. And after this, I'd like to tell you about my own situation. In July 2022, I got an email from a woman I slightly knew who was asking if there was going to be any retreat in everyday life in that autumn. I would have known if there was any plan for that, but I did not. But I proposed to give it to her personally. She was delighted by that possibility, and we planned to begin the 6-week process in the beginning of September. I would give her the material. She would pray with the texts at home, and we would meet weekly. My husband had been ill for many years, and he had felt poorly for many months. We both knew that he would die from this illness in some time, but neither of us knew how long it would take. In August, he was in hospital several times and every now and then at home. We started the retreat and my husband's situation got worse all the time. I was wondering whether I should tell her something about my own situation, but I thought maybe it was best that she didn't know. My role was to listen to her, just listen. The listening was easy and it took my mind from thinking about what was happening in my own family. But to my great astonishment, that retreat was such a blessing to her. Big things happened in her life during those weeks. God was really speaking to her. She was so blessed and happy and empowered. She found out what she should do, something she had not dared to do before. She found the power of forgiving. And I had just sat and listened to her. Somehow this joyous, miraculous finding she had also helped my own situation. I could just listen to what God was doing in her life. When the retreat was at the end and we met the last time, I told her that my husband had died. My experience reminded me of a Finnish film called Post to Pastor Jacob. Some of you have seen that film when it was seen in the SDE meeting in Finland. The film tells a small story of an old blind pastor Jacob. His purpose of life was to receive letters from people who asked him to pray for them. He prayed and answered them. Just at the end of the film, he understands he had thought that receiving, praying, and writing those letters were done for God. But as a matter of fact, those letters were for him. He said, maybe it was God's purpose to take care of him, to lead him home. Like my experience was that during that retreat, I was not the one who led, but God was leading me. In a Finnish verse of hymn, It is said shortly but insightfully. In God's kingdom, the weak are strong, the sick cures you healthy, and the receiver helps the giver. Thank you for listening me.
Thank you so much, Sirkka-Liisa. Do you have any questions for us? But we can. Thank you so much. Yes, and I think that it's very lovely if these questions can stay, and we will be this 10 minutes personal reflection first, and then we will come back and we will have again this sharing in our groups. And blessed reflection, all of us. Thank you. And first group, who would like to share in your group? Lehel, was it your group?
Yes, it was my group, and Steve will summarize what we discussed.
Thank you.
Yes, we were grateful to have the reminder of the story of Henri Nouwen's advice and his own knowing his own experience, the extent of his own woundedness. We reflected on how our woundedness can push us in either of two directions: to become more selfish people, or to be more of greater service through God's grace. Our woundedness can be a problem for us if we project our woundedness onto the directee, and if we feel too much aware of our own woundedness, that we have no confidence in being able to serve them, to really give them service. And so we need the assurance of our own spiritual director, anybody else who is able to give us advice and perhaps to give us just a sufficient confidence that despite our own woundedness, we can be part of God's healing work. If any of you have had the experience of suffering an epileptic fit, this is a kind of demonstration of woundedness and spiritual awareness put very close together. There's a picture in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg of the Transfiguration, and underneath at the bottom part of the panel, the healing of the epileptic boy. And the artist had obviously read the Gospels and saw that these two stories, this story of insight into the glory and holiness of Christ, and the pain, the physical pain and degradation, really, of suffering, can go very close together. And certainly for me in my own life and ministry, this has been support and help.
Thank you, Steve. Second group.
Yes, it's Penny who is going to.
I'm so bad at numbers. I thought we were number 3. Our group, it was really interesting, actually. We focused on the blessing that our directees are often to us. And we began with a reflection on when we've had somebody with us, and it take time afterwards just to see how what resonance there is within me from what has been shared. Why has the Spirit brought this to me today? Why has the Spirit brought this person to me today? That was kind of the sharing of a couple of us, and an opportunity for our own growth then. And obviously that does come out of our vulnerability, because we're aware that we do actually need to grow, and God gives us, through our directees, often the opportunity to. Yes, the idea, I get the directee that I need. And what do I need to understand from this person? And that, of course, comes out of our own vulnerability, our own awareness that we are not totally complete. We are wounded, and we find solace from one another and being together. Sometimes it's from the directee coming to us. Sometimes it's from us going to our own spiritual director, but it's such a good reminder of the body of Christ that we're not meant to be on our own. And of course, if we were always fully capable and never vulnerable, we'd never learn this. We'd never experience this. There was, of course, the question about, actually, can I afford to give hospitality if I'm grieving? Am I emotionally able to?
Yes.
And sometimes the answer will be no.
Yes.
And it's really important to recognize that. Sometimes we will need our own space. Sometimes there's a very deep connection with our directee, because what they're experiencing is something that we have experienced, but we never need to say. And there's something very beautiful about that. But we may just come away feeling blessed by their presence and what God is going to do through them. We reflected very briefly on the fact that, actually we have to be wounded to be able to be healers. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Penny. And third group, Caroline, please. Caroline, can you
Yes. Okay.
thank-
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Some very interesting parallels. Somebody was sharing that it was very necessary to know, when you're in your own brokenness, what is the right way forward. Is it to have a break from directees? Is it to seek a spiritual director? And that followed on that somebody had sought spiritual direction at a very difficult time for them, and it was not the right person. And she learned to trust her sense that this person was not right at that particular time, and that what the other person should have been doing was to listen a great deal more to her. And that led to appreciation of how deeply we need to listen to one another and not break in. And then that followed with somebody saying, well, of course, they have a lot to teach us. If we are listening truly, they will teach us a lot. So there was a lot that linked up. And then somebody shared having an experience where there was a loss of a spiritual director, and they had to work through it themselves with God, within themselves, with scripture, at a particular time of vulnerability. So that in itself was a desert experience. And she felt that she grew in humility in that time, when eventually, she's listening to other people, but to know the right way to look after yourself. And lastly, somebody was saying how in their own culture, vulnerability, talking to somebody in spiritual direction is not easy at all. And so it is, you have to have as a director, you need a deeper appreciation of just what it's costing people to come to you. So that was some very rich contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Penny, and thank you, Caroline, and thank you, all of you. Are there any questions to Catherine or to Sirkka-Liisa? Then probably not. Then thank you all of you, and thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Sirkka-Liisa, one more time. And now we
Yeah,
have.
thank you both for these were very inspiring talks today. Very
Yes.
helpful for Lent as well.